And for more, we're joined by Dustin Barter, Senior Research Fellow at the Humanitarian Policy Group at ODI, which is a global affairs think tank. Dustin, thank you for joining us. Now, Myanmar's military government is still facing resistance 3 years after it seized power. Based on recent events, do you think the unrest will worsen across the country?
I think it has a long way to play out, but in the past few months, there's been a lot of hope coming out of Myanmar with a lot of gains by the revolution and the resistance. And a lot of, not just in the north, but also in the east, we've seen Loy Kor been liberated by PDFs and ethnic armed collaboration as well. So there is still a lot of tense conflict to come, but there is this optimism and hope that the military can be ousted. And it's really important the international community gets behind the popular will of the Myanmar people, which is to get rid of the role of the military in politics and break free from the current dictatorship.
Now, a major offensive is underway by some of the armed groups against the military government. What have been the key strategic shifts in the dynamics of Myanmar's civil war, you think?
The breadth and the depth of the resistance is quite amazing. It's not just on armed conflict, but it also goes to governance. We've seen in Rakhine, the Arakan army has gone on its own kind of governance offensive along with armed offensive. You have different payment systems using blockchain, using cryptocurrency to kind of circumvent the military's attempts to kind of control money flows within the country. You see a lot of the ethnic armed insurgencies, they've been in existence for decades. They operate like a state. They're providing education services, health services. And you see this kind of unity across much of the population to really oust this kind of military dominance, and also some call for this like revolution of breaking free from indoctrination of the military over so many decades. So there's a lot of different nuances and really quite profound and innovative ways from the early days of the protest movement to this ongoing increasing control of by the revolutionary groups across much of Myanmar. So there is a lot of reason for hope, but really, it has become one of many neglected crises globally, and the international community needs to re-engage with all these groups in Myanmar doing really amazing, profound work.
All right, so let's talk about Myanmar's foreign relations. China has been strengthening ties with what some consider a rogue state. Does Beijing have a stake in keeping Myanmar's military leadership in power? What's in it for China?
There's lots of conflicting analysis on China's engagement and China's preferences, but there is a strong justification to say that China was quite annoyed with the military coup 3 years ago because it disrupted what was an otherwise relatively stable period for Myanmar, recognizing there was still the genocide against the Rohingya and lots of armed conflict and fighting and violence against ethnic minority groups such as the Kachin, Karen, and others. So the current situation, it seems to be that China has given a bit of a blessing or at least a go-ahead to the Operation 1027, and there is kind of a frustration seemingly from China with the way the military is running the country and still trying to go on these scorched earth tactics, and the economy is collapsing. A lot of Chinese economic interest within Myanmar are facing a lot of difficulties because of all this conflict and instability. So I think China at the end of the day would prefer to have a stable Myanmar, and a stable Myanmar in the long run is going to be one where the revolution succeeds. So China may not be explicit about wanting that as an end goal, but in the end, that's how we're going to have a stable Myanmar, is through getting rid of the military rule.
Now, on the humanitarian front, how would you describe the humanitarian impact of the conflict, especially in terms of civilian displacement and suffering?
The displacement has been immense, and the humanitarian need was already very high before the coup, but it has just expanded astronomically. So as of 2024, it's over 18.5 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance, which is close to 40% of the population. These figures are enormous. The economy has collapsed since the coup through a lot of revolutionary and resistance activities, but also the military just keeps on going on their scorched earth tactics across all different parts of the country. So you see villages being burnt down, as you see in the images now, entire villages being displaced, indiscriminate airstrikes, consistent breaches of international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and just complete disregard for the civilians. So the military has lost all legitimacy, not that it had much to start with, and is really a time to kind of re-engage as the international community and go, okay, there's this huge humanitarian need. How can we work with particularly local and national civil society actors that have been key providing a lot of humanitarian assistance across the country? International actors, the UN agencies, have been very constrained and limited in their humanitarian access. So it's come down to Myanmar local networks and local actors who have been at the forefront of the humanitarian response.
Now, one last question. Aung San Suu Kyi has been under detention since the military seized power. Do you think she still plays a central role in the resistance? And is she still crucial for any sort of reconciliation?
I feel difficult answering this as an external, non-Myanmar person, but I feel there is some positive developments in that having Aung San Suu Kyi not in a leadership role at the moment and being sequestered away through this abhorrent long-term detention has actually given a lot of space and opportunities for ethnic minority groups and emerging young leaders and other leaders to kind of really contribute towards the resistance narrative and drive the revolution and have it not as centered around Aung San Suu Kyi. So I think that has been a positive in many developments, but as a whole, there is immense respect across the country for Aung San Suu Kyi, and it's critical that she is released as soon as possible, but also that when she is released, that she recognises that the revolution, the resistance has been a whole countrywide endeavour, and particularly a lot of ethnic minorities have faced some of the biggest violence and biggest challenges since the coup and preceding the coup, and really ensure that once she is released, that it is a whole country effort and there is movement towards not just reinstating democracy, but pushing for a federal democratic system that devolves power as well to ethnic administrations that have been critical to Myanmar's existence for decades and also the current revolution.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. Dustin Barter, Senior Research Fellow of the Humanitarian Policy Group at ODI, a global affairs think tank. Thank you so much.